listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, a show where we discuss living as a leader worth following, leading others to do the same, and in doing so, leaving a legacy for future generations. My name is Jimmy Gonzalez Jr., a learning and development professional and leadership coach, sitting down with my co-host, Anthony Devon Watts Jr., an expert contact center leader that has effectively led and developed dynamic teams with high motivation. Together, we have over 30 years experience in the corporate game. Join us as we discuss our growth as leaders, share the lessons we've learned, and interview others to see how their leadership style was shaped as they were mentored by adversity. Legacy leaders, good evening. Yes, it is another episode of Cold Brew and Convos with your L3G coaches. This is Coach Jimmy G, along with my homeboy, my good friend, Devon Watts Jr. Hope everybody is doing good this evening. Cheers to all of you out there.
Yeah, hopefully if you guys are in Florida or I guess up north too, you guys are trying to stay warm. But for those of you tuning in from like northern the United States, like y'all chose that life. Us down here in Florida, we didn't pick this. We didn't want 40-degree weather.
That is facts. We did not want that type of weather. I try to keep everything in perspective. You know, I've got family still up there. Most of my coworkers are up north, and they're like battling with 12 to 16 inches of snow every day. And then, you know, I just have to bundle up because it's 40 degrees when I go to the gym in the morning. So I try to, again, keep everything in perspective. But hey, good day. Definitely trying to bundle up in the legacy leadership swag. Shout out to Angelique Sanchez, and also Maite. They got some legacy leader swag coming up to them pretty soon as well. So we got folks out here. We have the community that are continuing to represent for sure. And I just want to give a shout out to Maite as well. I was going back and forth with her via text, and cool thing, man, she's actually using our content at work and like giving her leaders, you know, saying, hey, I want you to go watch this episode about goal setting, things like that. And then, you know, they come back and they talk about it and kind of give them action items and things to follow up on. So there's jewels being dropped, or as we like to call them, golden nuggets. Golden nuggets being dropped on a consistent basis. So definitely appreciate you guys, again, hanging with us this evening. We do have a specific topic that we're going to be talking about starting over, and really kind of from a micro and a macro perspective. We'll be talking about that topic, which goes right in line with, you know, what we've been really focusing on over the last couple of weeks. So if you haven't heard, the newest episode of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast just dropped today, which is episode 28. Yeah, 28. Because the one with Kobe was 27. So 28 just dropped, which really answers the question, what is grit and how do you develop grit? And then really getting into specific things that you can do to cultivate grit in the workplace. And then next week, leading up to next week's episode, we're going to be talking about resilience, right? So grit and resilience are two things that we're focusing on and we'll continue to focus on for the rest of February as well. So if you haven't peeped, again, this episode, make sure you go check it out.
That's Big Jim.
Yes, we do have Big Jim Pops actually sending me some pictures of what the outside of his front door looked like, you know, in the morning time, send it to the family. And yeah, it was great. Like mountains of snow. So I feel for my folks up there for sure. But yeah, so, you know, interestingly enough, we've been talking about grit. We've been talking about resiliency, and even, you know, talking to my dad briefly about it because he's going through a course through Western Governor, and the conversation or topic of grit came up. And I know he was watching some TED Talks about that. I believe Angela Duckworth is her name. Has been talking about that topic for years. Has some really great content out there as well.
Yeah, she has.
Our content is pretty good too, so make sure you check it out. But really taking those concepts and thinking about some of the lessons that I've learned at work, over the last several weeks and even today. So again, we're going to be jumping into this topic, and I'm going to share my screen. So we are good to go.
Boom.
How's that look?
Looks good, man. Yep.
Okay. So starting over, and we've been talking about resiliency and really how to reset for resiliency at work. It's been a program we've actually been going through for several weeks. So I was super blessed to be able to have that type of offering through the organization that I work with. And, one of the things that came up, which again fit right in line with what we're discussing this evening, is starting over. So we've talked about goal setting, the importance of goal setting, how goal setting and perseverance really work together. And it's February. And we know, we're kind of 1/12 already into the year. And we know around this time, actually, I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. I think it's the 18th of January is typically when people start to fall off from their New Year's resolutions and any goals that they may have set for themselves. But really, again, from a micro perspective, what we want to share with you as far as starting over is that it's okay to do so. When you think about how you cultivate grit in yourself and resiliency, the ability to be able to, say you know what, I'm gonna give myself some grace. Maybe, my thoughts on my goals kind of drifted a little bit, but it's okay to get myself balanced again, get myself right back in track and to start over. And again, realize that it's okay to do so. Sometimes we beat ourselves up so much about mistakes that we made or the fact that we've fallen off our health and fitness goals or our goals trying to get focused and develop that, or our goals in whatever that may be for us, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, that we set for the year. So give yourself grace and realize that it is okay to start over. So again, Devon and I are going to be really breaking this down for you guys. Because starting from scratch might be an unsettling thought, but often we're forced to start over in our lives. And sometimes it's not even, something that we necessarily chose to do. Whether it's a new career, we had a lot of people, Devon has his examples. I have my examples, whether you decided to try to find a new place of work, whether you were furloughed or you would just let go altogether. Maybe it's a new romance or building everything from the ground up. Starting over, it definitely can be scary. Even for myself, going into a situation where I left my old employer and went to a new one. But after 18 years and the bulk of my career with that company, again, starting over can definitely be a challenge. It isn't impossible, though. So no matter how things are going, just know that you can embrace starting over with the 9 tips that we're going to give you. And of course, 3 action items. We always want to leave you with some action items that you can practically apply tonight, tomorrow, as soon as possible to help you start working on things that you can do to get more comfortable with starting over.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's jump into it, man.
All right. Number 1, I'm gonna let you take this one because I know my man is kind of the expert on instincts. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So trust your instincts. Trusting your instincts. If you start feeling like it's time to start over in some way, you get that unsettling feeling, those thoughts, those inklings, then give those feelings some serious consideration. Like really examine what is the origin of those thoughts, those feelings. And you may find out that it's actually warranted. Like we all have moments like this, but if your moments are always on your mind, then you might need to honor those feelings. I appreciate you allowing me to talk a little bit about instincts because those that have had an opportunity to just hear my perspective on this. I'm just a firm believer that for those of us that have, made our way into leadership, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're running your own business, or you are a leader within a corporate environment or professional environment, you're a leader in your community. For those of us that have found ourselves in those spaces, it's because first and foremost, we've proven time and time again our instincts to be correct. And where I see a lot of leaders set themselves up for failure is as they get more leadership experience, as they climb the ladder, as inevitably, if you're doing it right, more is at stake and you're responsible for more.
Mm-hmm.
We start to trust our instincts less and less and less and less and less. And I know we've all had that moment where we had that gut feeling, we had that thought, we didn't give it any credence, we didn't pay it any mind, we pressed forward, and then the bottom falls out and we're like, man, I knew that was going to happen, right? It's because, again, we didn't trust our instincts. And so if you're having those feelings, like, stop. And nobody says you have to immediately take action, but stop, give it some serious thoughts, make sure that you examine it. And then again, if it's prudent, trust your instincts and start over.
Yeah, I of course I appreciate, that word from you. And I think about rewinding a little bit when I started over, left corporate America, came back and started working with you again, and kind of those first 90 days. And I remember, a conversation we had, and you remind me kind of, comparing it to like a quarterback that was gun shy. And like, you have the reps, like, what to do, like basically trust your instincts and just pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, we definitely need that reminder to trust in our instincts. And like you said, what has gotten us to that point in the first place. Number two thing, again, tip for you in regards to starting over, take some time. Like, no matter the context, starting over, it's really rarely done quickly or without some type of regret. As leaders, we're not perfect. And, it's easier for leaders, especially earlier on, in their career, and speaking about myself, to make some mistakes that can really be damaging to your relationships, damaging to your career. You have to take those opportunities to really just take some time, honor the feelings that you're having. I try not to live in regret, but honor the feelings that you are having, and take some time to mourn, that loss before you actually start thinking about the future, right? So it could be the loss of an opportunity. Maybe you were looking to get a promotion, and you were really hopeful for it, and it just did not happen for you, didn't come through. Again, maybe you made a really bad mistake, and there was some trust loss with your coworkers and your bosses and the people that you work with. Don't wallow in it, but give yourself an opportunity to just feel those feelings. Sometimes we try to, like, bury them deep down or push them way back. Feel those feelings. And then once you have an opportunity to do that, again, don't wallow in it. Then give yourself a chance to start thinking about the future, which will help you, again, to really start over.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Number 3, believe that it is possible. Like, people oftentimes, you're starting over in during dark times, whether, again, it's the loss of a relationship, the loss of an opportunity, right? And so it's important that you have faith that you can get through this, right? You have faith that you can get through this, that you believe that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that you're working towards something greater, right? If it's rooted in, your thoughts are rooted in just negativity and desperation and kind of hopelessness, it's obviously going to be really difficult to be motivated, to be fully committed to starting over, because starting over does require work. As somebody who's had to start over in a litany of spaces, I think probably in the areas that are the kind of we think about are the most important or the most impactful ones to have to start over. I had to start over from a relationship perspective. I was, again, involved in a relationship, and mutually decided to part ways, but literally was starting from ground zero, right? moving back into my parents' house for a brief period of time until I figured out like, okay, where am I going to set up shop at? Right.
Yeah.
Or starting over, from an employment perspective, as I experienced this past year. Again, both of those instances can be dark times, but you have to believe that greater is possible, that it's possible to get through this, as you're working towards something that's going to be bigger, better, even more fulfilling, even greater than what you are currently experiencing.
Oh yeah, definitely. One thing that comes to mind too is thinking about where we're at and the need to start over. So this came up as well in some conversations about, again, this resilience piece and, how do you start over? How do you allow yourself to kind of recover, you know what I mean, from certain situations? And it was ironic that we were talking about this and learning about this concept, but I had a conversation with somebody the previous day that was talking about just how they felt nostalgic about how things used to be from a work perspective. And, I can't wait till we get back to that time, and realizing that we're not going to get back to that time. Things in the future, whether that's 3, 6, 12 months from now, are not going to be in 2021 like they were in 2020 or 2019. It's just not possible. And it's almost like we're keeping ourselves in the past and how things used to be because it's comforting, and somewhat even of a coping mechanism because you might be scared. So you have to believe it's possible in a positive way for things to be different, for you to grow, for you to change, for the environment and things going around us to change. So much negativity, right? That we've seen, that we've experienced, that we've been through over the last year. We have to believe that it's possible to be able to move forward and not, again, get caught up in the past, but just think about what can we do to change today and keep improving today. And as we do those things, how much better it can be, and hopefully will be if we're keeping in that right direction, that it will be for us in the future.
Yeah, I think to that point too, before you get into the next step here for our legacy leaders, I also would just challenge folks because I think we have a tendency sometimes as people to over romanticize the past, and what we remember it to be is not exactly the full experience of what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes those longing for, again, days prior, days past, and getting back to what this experience was, to your point, will never be a reality, even if we could replicate the culture and the processes and the things, right? Because what we remember it to be is not 100% of what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's an inauthentic measuring stick to hold yourself to. And so I know that, with the next tip, we're going to talk about, forgiving yourself a little bit from the past. But I think that's part of that coping mechanism of forgiving yourself from the past is we over romanticize the past a little bit so that we don't have to be confronted with the pain of the past. So,
And as a leader, if you're trying to cultivate grit and resilience in your people, you have to show them that you believe it's possible so that they can see it themselves. And as a team, you can move forward. So forgive your past. If you're starting over because of mistake or a failure of yours, please try to forgive yourself. Again, thinking about situations in my life and some deep mistakes that I've made, getting to a point where I forgave myself and realized that, you ask yourself, how are you going to kind of start over and leave that old person, that old man behind? Especially if you have like self-loathing just hanging over your head, and how can I make a mistake like that? How can I do something like that? Especially when you're a leader and people are watching you. And there's plenty of leaders in multiple different spaces where there's, for one reason or another, there was kind of that fall from grace, right? And you sometimes allow that to hang over your head. The past is the past. Forgive yourself and forge a new path forward. And I think when you do that with realness, with authenticity, and even transparency, through that, people respect that, and you even see how the trust factor increases, how willing how people are even more so to follow you when they see that you're truly going down that path of forgiving yourself, forgetting about the past, and then moving forward in a much, much more positive direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our legacy leaders have heard us mention this numerous times, because you have to give yourself grace. You have to give yourself the same grace that you're willing to extend to other folks. And it's funny, I was just recently having a conversation, with a former employee that was just looking for some guidance and some mentorship, and through that, kind of those shared experiences, life experiences, we've been able to build a friendship. And I was just sharing with them that. As much as we have the capacity to be our biggest critics, because we absolutely have the capacity to be our biggest critics, and you kind of talk about self-loathing, if you're willing to acknowledge that, you also then have to acknowledge the other end of the spectrum, which means that we have the capacity to also be our biggest cheerleaders. And so if you have the same capacity to be your biggest critic, you have the same capacity to be your biggest cheerleader, and that you need to be honest with yourself. You need to be honest with yourself about the totality of your story. Yes. Again, sometimes when we're, going back and we're reflecting on our past, we're just not honest with ourselves about the totality of the story. And it's more comforting, for whatever reason, to pick up the bat and beat ourselves up. Either one, because we've learned that that's the space we should live in. Right. And so we kind of have this self-hatred cycle, which is unfortunate. Or two, we use it as a diversion tactic or as a way to deflect receiving criticism from others, right? Because if people already see me being hard on myself and beating myself up, right, then I'm not going to get outside criticism, which I really don't have the capacity to deal with. And so, you just got to be able to give yourself grace, and you got to understand, if you have the capacity to be your biggest critic, you 100% have the capacity to be your biggest cheerleader, and you should lean into that too.
Amen to that.
So we talked about forgiving your past, but don't forget it, right? Don't forget it. Forgiving yourself is definitely one thing, but you don't want to forget your past entirely. No matter what failures and successes that you've been able to have of the past, you should have received a lesson in that process. And it's important to take that lesson, analyze those mistakes, analyze, those shortcomings, right? And learn, improve, pivot, right? Use that in order to feed your resiliency, to feed your grit. And on the flip side, as you study those successes, be able to learn what allowed you to be successful and double down on that in the future. Double down on that in the future so that you can continue to have that level of unmitigated success. Again, figure out what didn't work and try to avoid those failings on your new journey. So definitely forgive yourself. Give yourself that grace, but don't forget. Right. Don't forget. Don't try to act like it never existed. There's a lesson in there. Right. I've always been a firm believer. No matter what, we don't take L's. We don't take L's. Right. We either take wins or we take lessons. That's it. No losses over here. And so definitely make sure that you're not forgetting, so you can, grab the lesson.
Exactly. Number 6, what do you want? What do you really want? Starting over can be scary, but there's also excitement in that if you allow for it. What do you want for the new you? What do you want for this new time in your life, for this new situation that you have? And I can't say that I was necessarily scared as I started this new job and this new kind of chapter in my career recently. But there was a little trepidation as I was going through that process. And I really had to think about not necessarily, who I want to be, because I'm just going to continue to be myself, but kind of what's that mark that I want to make now, with these new relationships, these new people, these new projects and initiatives that I'm going to be a part of. So you really have to ask yourself that, is there anything that you've always wanted to do? Is there something that you've wanted to try, or just even something that you've wanted to be? From an L&D perspective, learning and development, one thing that I see a lot, especially on LinkedIn, and give a shout out to, we're on LinkedIn for our LinkedIn pros out there. You can follow us.
LinkedIn. Find Jimmy on LinkedIn.
Inside joke. Some of you may know about that, but definitely Legacy and Leadership Podcast. Again, you can find us on LinkedIn. We have about over 300 folks that are following us and supporting us on that particular platform as well. But again, if there's anything that you want to do, try it. There's a lot of teachers, especially because of what has happened and transpired in 2020 with the pandemic, that have moved from teaching to instructional design. And as I read comments and articles, and some have even started podcasts about their journey, they talk about how difficult or scary and challenging that can be. But the whole point is just to try, like figure out what it is that you want to do. And even if you're not 100%, try something. You don't want it to be blindly throwing arrows and darts and stuff, but try different things until you find something that you really feel, okay, I can see myself doing this. I can find passion in this. But starting over is your chance at making things right and making improvements. So honor your personal preferences as you go through that process.
No, well said. Well said. All right. Tip number 7, reach out. You must, when you got to start over, it can definitely be overwhelming. So taking some time to reach out to your closest loved ones, that they can be the rock that you cling to. For me specifically, I kind of already mentioned to you guys at one point, I found myself years back starting over from a relationship perspective. And through that process, what I can definitely say is I sold myself short. One of the shortcomings I had was I was not cultivating and nurturing the network that I established around me. So when I started to break the news to my loved ones, to my friends, it caught a lot of people off guard because they had no insights into, kind of the personal journey that I've been going through, the journey that we were going through, and the kind of some of the struggles we were experiencing over that time period. Right. And so when I found myself in a position where I had to reach out or had to start over, I had to reach out in twofold. One, I had to reach out to let people know that this is what was going on with me and that I was starting over. But then I also had to reach out to my support system to help me get through that process, right? Because while I was assured in my instincts that I was making the right decision for myself, in that instance, it still doesn't, and I think you touched on this, it still doesn't negate the fact that you're mourning the loss of something, right? You're mourning the loss of, just the experiences and, coming to grips with maybe this image that you had of yourself and not living up to that image and, feeling like a failure, right? And so I had to reconcile a lot of those things and was fortunate enough to not only, seek out, professional help. So I have somebody to talk to through those things, but more importantly, to really connect and reach out to my network of relationships, people like Jimmy, people like Lewis, people like, my parents, like folks that were really in my circle, people, at work, right, between Richard and Mate and, Shale and just all these individuals that I was able to, be vulnerable with and reach out to, that really allowed me to overcome and go through that process, be able to successfully go through that process of starting over and not feel overwhelmed. So reaching out is important.
Really quick, I got to give Big Jim a shout out as well. Jimmy Gonzalez Sr., who was on live and rocking with us tonight. Again, just so many instances, where he's not just been a dad, but a mentor, and a number of situations where I've reached out to my dad. And again, when I read and just think about, what we've crafted here, that they can be that rock that you cling to. He's definitely been that, that for me, and other obviously family members, my mom, of course. But again, since Big Jim is with us right now, definitely want to show Pops some love. And it's just important, like you said, Devon, to have that network of people that you can trust, that are going to have unconditional love, and are going to steer you in the right direction, and sometimes it's because of the great experiences and how they've been able to navigate and miss certain situations, and sometimes because they've been through those situations themselves and they know how to to pull you out of that hole because they were in there at some point in their life as well. So definitely important to have that network. We talk about that on the podcast that we just recorded yesterday. That's going to be dropping next week. Again, the one that dropped today is all about grit and how you cultivate grit in the workplace. The podcast dropped this morning. The vidcast is going to be dropping as soon as we finish this live Cold Brew and Convos. And then again, next week is talking about resilience. So be on the lookout for that for sure.
Absolutely.
Number 8, we talk about this a lot. Create a plan for yourself, right? So we're talking about moving on and starting over, which is great. And maybe you have a super positive mindset about it. And that's not necessarily a challenge for you to say, all right, I need to start over. I need to do things differently. But create a plan for yourself so that you give yourself the best possible chance for success at reaching this new endeavor, this new you, whatever that may be. People who are starting over often feel rudderless or lost. One way to ease those feelings is to start thinking of your future, but don't just think about it, be about it, right? Make a plan, put action plans, get the pen, the pad, write things down, type it in your Microsoft to do, whatever it is that you're using, but put it down and then set some goals. Set some realistic goals for yourself, things that, again, we've talked about on a few of our different podcast episodes. If you haven't checked it out yet, our Focus for Success e-learning course was just dropped 2 weeks ago. We talk about goal setting, some practical things that you can do there as well, and how to make plans to achieve those goals and really build that laser-like focus to be able to do so. But in doing that, focus on those short-term and long-term goals. And really thinking about this plan of action will help start to ease your worries because you feel better about yourself. I'm thinking about the future and it's positive. I know the goals that I have set for myself. I've put some action plans in place, and knowing that you've at least taken those steps starts to give you a little bit more confidence and helps you feel better about yourself. Because you have a little bit more direction in where you're going.
Yep. 1,000%, man. Plan your work and work your plan.
There it is. Number 9. So embrace the future. We don't get a lot of chances at fresh start. So when you get one, you have to embrace it. You have to relish it. I know a lot of agony and heartbreak can lead to starting over. Again, we talked about some of these things, the sense of failure and coming to grips with the fact that, maybe things didn't go as you planned, the whole nine. But this is an opportunity where you're truly starting with a blank sheet of paper. That means the opportunities, the options are limitless. It can be whatever masterpiece you want it to be. So, embrace the fact that it's a blank canvas and don't dwell over the fact that, maybe you had some paint end up in the wrong place the last time you tried to paint, right? Take the time you need to mourn your past life, but don't feel ashamed of it. If you feel more than a little excited about what's to come, that's exactly what we're looking for. That's the motivation that you need. Again, you have to hold on to that hope, that optimism of what's in front of you, not what you've left. Absolutely. And you may be watching this and ask, like, what does this have to do with leadership? If that's what you guys focus on. Well, this is about leading yourself, and we cannot run from the heartache, the sorrow, the tragedy, that we have all experienced, right? And I've mentioned this before, like, we're not all on the same boat. We are in the same ocean, but we've been in different boats. But we're definitely all in the same ocean in what we've experienced in separate and different ways in 2020. And you can get caught up in living in the past and how things used to be and hoping that it might be like that in the future. Well, if you're a leader in your business, if you're a small business owner, just realize and witness so many people that their businesses closed because they were holding on to the past and not adapting and being flexible enough to start embracing the future and what this new reality could be. So you have to do that as a leader, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working in corporate America. Again, think about those things, how you lead yourself, and then how those examples lead your team and how you help them learn how to start over if need be. And again, really not completely forget about the past. Think about it, learn from it. But how do we carve this way forward as we go into this, this new world that we're all embarking in as we go through 2021?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, to your point, as a leader, whether you're running a small business, corporate America, it doesn't matter, in your community. If you're in a leadership role, people are looking to you for cues on what's acceptable, what's acceptable, and how do we handle adversity, how do we handle situations. And so when they get exposed to the fact that you're willing to start over, where appropriate, and not just I think what we're sharing here is not flippantly starting over with just saying, okay, no, that didn't work, and I'm just going to start over again. I'm going to do exactly what I was doing before, right? But reflectively, being able to start over, because the tips that we're sharing, there's a methodology to the process of starting over, from reconciling your emotional feeling, reconciling, kind of the mental component, analyzing what you've done before, not living in the past, but learning from the past, being able to cast a vision of the future, being able to embrace, again, the endless opportunity for what's on the horizon. Like, all of those things are critical steps to being able to effectively start over. And so, yeah, I love what you mentioned, right? This is about leading yourself, right? Leading yourself. And as a leader, I think anybody can attest to this, if you've been in leadership for long enough, is the most important individual that you can lead is you, right? If you don't have mastery over yourself and being able to effectively lead yourself, how can you reasonably expect to effectively lead others, right? And so, if you're looking for, one of the most impactful cold brew combo segments from my perspective, it would be this very topic that we're talking about, because it's focused on making you better, right? Not making your team better. If we make you better, your team is naturally going to get better, because they're going to see the example that you're setting, and how you are constantly challenging yourself to grow.
Amen. If you've been following us for any amount of time, one of the first things we're trying to do is teach you how to live like a leader worth following. And these 9 steps that we've just provided to you in how to start over will help you to do just that. And realizing, again, that it's okay to start over and move forward in a positive direction. So we gave you 9 tips. As promised, we are now going to give you 3 action items. So number 1, think about all the areas of your life. Are there any that can actually use like a total reboot, right? Maybe it's your way of thinking. Maybe it's your career right now. A lot of people had to reinvent themselves, as well, as they find that the type of work that they were doing wasn't necessarily deemed essential, or they found themselves in a position where those type of businesses were being shut down, and they really had to reinvent themselves. Are you suffering from a bad relationship? Is there something that's happened with a loved one, a spouse, whatever that may be? Is your career just crushing your soul, where you know that this is not your purpose, this is not your passion, and you still may be very grateful for the fact that you're getting paid, you can take care of yourself and your family, but it really truly is crushing your soul? Do you just want to be somewhere else? Sometimes you need a change, and that's okay. Anywhere else will do, right? Again, not flippantly, but really analyzing that and trying to find the best spot for you. And God willing, that he'll lead you in that direction. So think about those areas in life. Once you've thought about it, single out a specific area that you feel needs change the most, and then write that area of life down. Okay, write it down. Now, take some time to figure out just a single step that you can take. Do you need to talk with your partner? Do you need to start looking for new jobs? Do you need to update your LinkedIn profile? Do you need to start, taking a look at your resume? We had one of our MBA guests, Dave Perez, a great resume and just career coach. Maybe you need somebody like that to be able to help you through that process. Whatever it may be, think about a small step that you could take today that might change your life forever, right? Do it now. Don't wait. We're dropping gems. We're not just giving you tips, but we're giving you practical things that you can do. So again, we encourage you guys to really, again, think about those areas, write it down, take one step, select it, choose it, and then commit to yourself to actually putting that step into place. Maybe not tonight. Maybe it is. Maybe you need to go to LinkedIn and start, dusting off that resume and trying to improve it and go from there, if that's the change that you feel that you need to make. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Again, 9 tips and then 3 action steps on what you can do to positively start over. We always appreciate you guys rocking with us. Again, we're here every Wednesday night in our Facebook community, Legacy Leader Community, for Cold Brew and Convos with your L3G coaches. Of course, our podcast drops every Wednesday. Podcast dropped earlier today. Vidcast is about to be dropped on our YouTube channel. If you haven't been there yet, make sure you check out the visual component of what we do, and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you like the comments, hit that little alert bell bell as well, so that you always know when we have new content dropping. It's not just a podcast. We have clips, we have micro learning content that teaches you different topics in very bite-sized chunks and very quickly, so you can get it, you can digest it, and then again, go start to apply what it is that we are teaching you. You can always follow us on Instagram as well, at Coach_Jimmy G, at Leadership Docent for Devon, and definitely follow the Legacy and Leadership Podcast at Legacy Leadership on Instagram and Twitter as well. You can always do that. So any last words, my friend?
Only last words that I really have, not necessarily tied to this, but I did want to just make sure that you guys hear personally from us just our deepest appreciation for those that have been rocking with the podcast and listening. If you missed the announcement, this past week, we actually received the distinction of being the podcast of the week, the site of the week for Podbeam. We know that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't, for this legacy leader community, you guys engaging, you guys consuming, you guys listening and sharing the word and, the episodes. And, that has already, opened up, doors and ears for us in a very, very short period of time. So hopefully we'll be able to share a little bit more with you guys in the future on some of those things that, that'll be coming down the pipeline and things that we're considering as we get some new guests and things like that. But yeah, man, in these past 3 days since we've gotten that distinction, we have been blessed enough to have our message reach over 38 different countries in these past 3 days. And again, it's a testament to you guys in the community that we've been building. Right. I love, one of the points you made about, teachers transitioning to the learning development space and just encouraging them to hey, just start. We took that same exact leap of faith 7-8 months ago of just starting. And if anybody's been rocking with us from the beginning, that episode 28 is nothing like episode 1, right? There's been a lot of refinement in this process, but that's because throughout that entire journey, this is about to be the trainer in me, making sure that I do a tie back, right? But throughout that entire journey, we've never been afraid of starting over when it comes to our processes. And so this is the end result of that, of being committed to learning, starting over methodically, not flippantly. And we've been able to build something fantastic, and just honored to have you guys a part of it. So thank you.
Absolutely. As always, to our legacy leaders out there, have a blessed evening. God bless, and stay encouraged.